The great hall of Vairmore Castle glittered with candlelight on the night of the betrothal feast. Long tables stretched across the stone floor, filled with silver plates and golden goblets. Wolves of noble blood sat shoulder to shoulder, laughing, drinking, and watching their new alpha king with proud eyes. Cale Draven sat at the head of the table, dressed in a deep blue coat that matched his tired eyes. Tomorrow he would be crowned. Tonight, he was expected to announce his engagement to Princess Sable Ironclaw, the daughter of a powerful neighboring pack. The engagement was not a matter of love. It was a matter of survival. 20 years ago, a terrible war between the two packs had nearly destroyed them both. The peace treaty that followed was built on one promise, that one day, the heir of Vairmore would marry the heir of the Ironclaw pack. Cale had grown up knowing this. He had accepted it the way one accepts the weather. There was no changing it, only living with it. Princess Sable sat beside him, elegant in a silver gown, her chin lifted with practiced pride. She was not unkind. She was simply someone who understood duty as well as he did. From time to time, she glanced at him and offered a small, polite smile, the kind two people share when they both know a performance is expected of them. The feast rolled on. Musicians played softly in the corner. Servants moved between the tables, refilling cups and clearing plates. Cale barely noticed them, his mind circling around the speech he was supposed to give before the night ended. Then, a young woman entered the hall carrying a tray of wine. She was quiet, dressed in the simple gray uniform of the palace staff, her dark hair tied back neatly. She moved without drawing attention to herself, the way maids were trained to do. Her name was Wren Ashby, and she had worked in the castle kitchens for nearly 3 years. She was not important, she was not noticed, until tonight. The moment Cale's eyes landed on her, something inside him shifted violently. His wolf, usually calm and controlled after years of discipline, surged forward with a force that nearly knocked the breath from his lungs. His hands gripped the edge of the table, his vision sharpened, and for one dizzying second, the entire hall seemed to fade except for her. Mate. The word rang through his mind like a bell, clear and undeniable. He had heard stories of this moment his whole life. The instant recognition, the pull so strong it could not be ignored. He had always assumed it was something poets exaggerated. Now he understood it was real, and it was happening to him, in front of 300 guests, on the night he was supposed to announce his engagement to someone else. Wren felt his stare and glanced up instinctively. Their eyes met for only a heartbeat before she looked away, confused by the strange intensity in the young king's expression. She lowered her head and continued pouring wine, her hands trembling slightly, though she could not explain why. Cale forced himself to look away. He clenched his jaw, breathed slowly, and reminded himself where he was and what was expected of him. He could not afford chaos. Not tonight. Not ever, really. He turned back to Sable, offered a stiff smile, and finished the evening as planned, giving a short, formal speech about unity and peace between their two packs. The guests cheered. Sable accepted his hand for a dance. Cale smiled through it all, though his heart pounded with something he could not name and did not want. In the days that followed, Cale tried to bury what had happened. He told himself it was exhaustion, or stress from the coronation, or some trick of the candlelight. He avoided the kitchens. He avoided the halls where servants gathered. He filled his days with council meetings and training sessions, anything to keep his mind occupied. But his wolf did not forget so easily. At night, Cale found himself restless, pacing his chambers, unable to sleep. His control, usually iron-strong, began slipping in small ways. He snapped at guards over minor mistakes. He grew impatient during meetings that once bored him without incident. His eyes, more than once, flickered gold without his permission, a sign of a wolf struggling to stay beneath the surface. The council noticed. Elder Rowan, the oldest and most respected of Cale's advisors, pulled him aside after a tense meeting one afternoon. "Your Majesty," he said carefully, "something is troubling you. Your wolf is unsettled. This is not like you." Cale brushed him off. "I am simply preparing for the crown. There is much to think about." Rowan studied him with narrowed eyes, but said nothing more. He was old enough to recognize the signs of a mate bond fighting to be acknowledged, but he decided to wait and watch rather than speak too soon. Cale's restraint lasted nearly 2 weeks. Then, during a private council session about border patrols, Ren was called in briefly to deliver refreshments. She entered quietly, set the tray down, and turned to leave. Kale, distracted by a report in front of him, looked up at the wrong moment. Their eyes met again. This time, his control shattered. His eyes flashed gold in front of the entire council, unmistakable and impossible to hide. A low growl rumbled in his chest before he could stop it. Every wolf in the room stiffened, recognizing the signal immediately. Elder Rowan's expression turned grave. Two other counselors exchanged alarmed looks. Ren, startled and unsure what she had done wrong, quickly excused herself and hurried out of the room, her heart racing. The silence that followed was heavy. "Your Majesty," Rowan said slowly, "your wolf has chosen its mate, and it is not the princess." Kale did not deny it. He could not. The truth had revealed itself too clearly for pretending. Within hours, the news spread through the castle like wildfire. Servants whispered in the hallways. Nobles murmured behind closed doors. By the next morning, it had reached Sable and her family, delivered by a nervous messenger who could barely meet the princess's eyes as he explained. Sable's reaction was not simple anger, though anger was certainly part of it. She felt humiliated in front of her family and her people, replaced by a maid with no title, no lineage, no political value. But beneath the humiliation was something more complicated: fear. If the engagement collapsed, the fragile peace between their packs could collapse with it. She had spent her whole life preparing to be a queen who kept two nations from war. Now that purpose was slipping away, and she did not know what would take its place. The Ironclaw family did not take the news quietly. They sent a formal letter to the Veremore Council, demanding the engagement proceed as promised, mate bond or not. Many among Kale's own pack agreed. A mate bond was sacred, yes, but tradition and treaties, they argued, mattered more to the survival of the kingdom than a wolf's instinct. The council summoned Kale for a formal audience. Dozens of pack elders, warriors, and nobles filled the throne room, their faces a mixture of concern, anger, and disappointment. Kale stood before them, feeling the weight of every eye in the room. "You will end this foolishness," one elder said sharply. "The maid is nothing, a momentary madness of the wolf. You will marry Princess Sable as agreed, and this matter will be forgotten." "It is not that simple," Kale replied, his voice steady despite the storm inside him. "A mate bond is not something I can undo. My wolf has chosen. Fighting it will only destroy me from the inside." "Then perhaps you are not fit to rule," another voice called out, harsh and cold. The room erupted into arguments, voices rising over one another, until Elder Rowan raised his hand for silence. "Enough," he said firmly. "This is not a decision to make in anger. We will investigate the matter properly before any action is taken." Meanwhile, Ren's life had turned upside down. She was pulled from her kitchen duties and placed under a kind of quiet watch, neither prisoner nor free. Some staff treated her with sudden, uncomfortable respect. Others glared at her with open resentment, blaming her for endangering the peace between two packs. She had done nothing but exist, yet she found herself at the center of a storm she never asked to be part of. One evening, Kale sought her out personally, ignoring the whispers that followed him through the halls. He found her in a small courtyard garden, sitting alone on a stone bench, staring at nothing in particular. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, sitting a respectful distance away. "For all of this, you didn't ask for any of it." Ren looked at him, her expression guarded. "Neither did you, I suppose. But it doesn't change what's happening. Everyone hates me now. And you're supposed to marry a princess." "I know," Kale admitted. "But I can't force my wolf to feel something it doesn't. And I won't pretend the bond doesn't exist, just because it's inconvenient for everyone else." Ren was quiet for a long moment. "What happens if you choose me? Really choose me? Won't it start a war?" It was a fair question, one Kale had asked himself countless times. He didn't have a perfect answer, only a growing certainty that ignoring the bond would destroy him just as surely as any war might. As the days passed, something unexpected happened. Elder Rowan, continuing his investigation into Ren's background as protocol required, discovered records that had been buried for years. Ren's mother, it turned out, had once been part of a smaller allied pack that had quietly dissolved after suffering heavy losses during the same war that had created the Iron Claw Treaty. Her bloodline, though not powerful in recent memory, was not without honor or history. She was not simply nobody, as many had assumed. She carried a lineage that had once stood loyally beside Veremore in its darkest hour. This discovery shifted the conversation, if only slightly. It gave Rowan something to present to the council beyond raw instinct and scandal. A reason, however small, to argue that the bond was not a reckless mistake, but perhaps something closer to fate correcting an old debt. Still, the Ironclaw family remained furious, and a formal challenge was proposed. If Chaol wished to break the betrothal, he would need to prove before both packs, through a public trial of leadership and control, that his choice would not weaken Veremore or endanger the peace. It was an old tradition, rarely used, designed to test whether an alpha's judgment could still be trusted after such a disruption. Chaol accepted without hesitation. The trial took place a week later in the great courtyard, before members of both packs, including Sable and her family. Chaol was tested not through combat, but through a series of demanding challenges meant to reveal his self-control, his wisdom, and his ability to lead calmly under pressure, settling a mock dispute between rival advisors, maintaining composure while provoked, and demonstrating command over his wolf, even in Ren's presence, something that had shattered his control just weeks before. This time, Chaol did not falter. His wolf remained steady beneath the surface, calm and controlled, no longer fighting against him now that the bond had been acknowledged rather than denied. He answered each challenge with patience and clarity, proving that accepting his mate had not weakened him, but had, in some strange way, made him steadier than before. By the end of the trial, even some of his harshest critics were forced to admit that the young king standing before them seemed more composed, more certain, than he had been in weeks. Sable watched the entire trial in silence. When it was over, she approached Chaol privately, away from the crowds. "I won't pretend this doesn't hurt my pride," she said honestly, "but I've watched you these past weeks, and I think forcing this marriage would have made us both miserable, and perhaps weaker rulers because of it. I would rather have peace between our packs, built on respect, not resentment." They agreed instead to a new treaty, one that preserved the alliance through friendship and cooperation, rather than marriage, a modern promise built on mutual benefit, rather than obligation. It was not the ending anyone had originally planned, but it was one both sides could accept with dignity. In the end, the council, seeing Chaol's proven control and the renewed peace between the packs, allowed the mate bond to stand. Ren was formally recognized, her lineage acknowledged, and slowly, cautiously, the pack began to accept what their king's wolf had known from the very first moment their eyes had met in the Great Hall. Chaol and Ren's bond was not celebrated with the grandeur of a royal wedding at first, but with something quieter and perhaps more meaningful. A pack learning, slowly, that loyalty and love did not always follow the paths that tradition expected, and that sometimes, the strongest kingdoms were built not on old promises, but on new understanding.